Thank you. So just a little bit of background. Founded ChowNow about 4 years ago. We're about 80 people based in Playa Vista, just down the street. 4 years ago, there's 2 or 3 of us at events like this, pitching, doing demos all day long. We've since grown, and we now work about 3,000 restaurants across the country. We have at least one restaurant client in every state, with most of our clients either here in LA, Chicago, or New York. And so we're all fans of food these days. Everyone's a foodie. We all watch food being made on TV, famous chefs. But I want to talk about kind of what's going on behind the scenes as it relates to restaurants and technology. This would help. And so kind of set the stage, I want to talk about basically a very high level, very simplified view of the restaurant industry and the way it breaks down. And so the restaurant industry, for the most part, is a massive long tail. 90% of the restaurants in the US are independently owned, small mom and pop operations. The other 10% are massive groups, everyone from McDonald's to Domino's on down. And so you have these basically 2 different buckets. Here you have the small mom and pop, who for the most part lives offline. They're in their restaurants all day long. They do everything from greet the guests to prepare the food, to order the food early in the morning, to set the tables. And then you have the large groups who have massive teams, who have marketing people and PR people and huge tech departments and people managing their CRM systems. And so it's very, very different. And so what's happening in the last couple of years is that these massive groups are having a huge advantage over the small independent restaurants. And so what that creates is a market for us. And what we do is we work with these small independent restaurants so they can have essentially the same tools to compete with the Domino's. So we work with small little pizzerias so they can have mobile apps, so they can have ordering on their website, so they can have their own CRM, so they know what the value of their customer is worth to them. Basically the same things that their competition, like a Domino's or Papa John's, also have. And so because of this dynamic of these small mom and pop restaurants and these massive groups, the massive groups are constantly talking about how they have a huge advantage. And so here's a quote from Patrick Dole, who's the CEO of Domino's. And what Domino's has really become over the last decade is not the old school pizzeria that we kind of think of Domino's as. They now describe and think of themselves as a tech company that just happens to sell food. All their ads are about how easy it is to order food, how convenient it is. They don't even talk about the food anymore. It's all about how easy it is. And so the small pizzerias don't have the same tools to compete. And so if you look at the stock price of Domino's and the sales, it's just been off the charts. It's near an all-time high. Same is true here with Starbucks. Starbucks have great mobile app, great tech. They have a huge team in Seattle that builds out very sophisticated technology, mobile app, etc. And because of that, they're dominating. Sales are all-time high, stocks at all-time high. And so you're a small little coffee shop. You may have much better coffee, but it's becoming harder and harder to compete. And so what has happened here is you have these small independent restaurants who are basically desperate for tools to compete. And so they basically have 2 options. One option is to go build this themselves, spend tens of thousands of dollars, hire local engineers, and probably most of us in the room know how hard it is to hire engineers these days, and have their own system built, which frankly isn't feasible for a lot of these restaurants. The other option is they get a call from one of these groups, like a Grubhub, who says, hey, we'll get you online tomorrow, no money up front, it's easy, and you can be taking orders in no time. But what they don't say is they're basically offloading their entire business to this third-party tech company who now takes ownership of their to-go business, their entire takeout customer base, and is now selling them back to the restaurant every single time that customer orders over and over and over again. And given the dynamic of takeout business at a restaurant, 80% of these orders are from repeat customers. And so it becomes very costly for restaurants. And if you start to know the margins of restaurants, which on average are about 15% profit margins, they're essentially giving their entire profits to these third parties. And this happens over and over and over again. And so it's been very damaging to a lot of restaurants, and they're now looking for places to turn. And so there's companies like us who take a very different stance. And what we believe in is that there should be this direct connection with the restaurant and with the customer, and that the technology and the technology platform should be in the background. And so this is what we've always believed. This is what we launch. Most people don't know ChowNow because we sit in the background and we make sure that the restaurant's brands are front and center. And there's now a whole movement around this. And so I'm talking specifically about the restaurant industry, There's another company called Olo who's very similar to us. They work with larger groups than we do. We tend to work with independent restaurants. They tend to work with kind of mid-sized groups. But Shopify has been doing this for about a decade. A company called MindBody has been doing it in the spa arena, so they work with yoga studios and spas to give them the tools to compete. And then Squarespace is obviously doing with websites, providing platforms for these independent small businesses to get online and keep that direct connection with the customer. And so that's very much the philosophy that we share. And so now what we're seeing is that model of building a tech platform, building a consumer brand, and inserting yourself and essentially hijacking the customer away from underlying small business happen all over again in the delivery space. And so I'm not sure if you guys saw the news yesterday, but In-N-Out, who obviously has a massive legal department, actually sued DoorDash because this is happening over and over and over again. And so In-N-Out, huge brand, huge company, they get press. There are a lot of independent small restaurants who don't have those resources and can't stand up and can't sue because they don't have the budget to. And so it's the exact same model over and over and over again. And so what we've done recently is we actually partnered with the company on the all the way on the right-hand side, Uber, who shares our philosophy when it comes to delivery. And what we're building with them is a massive delivery network that's going to sit in the background. So much like you go to Amazon, you buy something on Amazon, you don't know how it's going to show up at your house or office, it just shows up. It could be FedEx, it could be DHL, it could be any other courier service. This is what we believe should happen. You should go to your local restaurant, you should order, should be a very easy experience, and that food just arrives at your house. And that's the way we're going to power it from a software, and Uber is going to be powering it from a delivery stance. So it's very different than the Uber that you guys use and that I use as well. Purely a last mile courier service that you won't be able to order food from directly. And again, we share this kind of vision of customer has always walked in the restaurant, always had that relationship. If you go there every single morning to get coffee, you know the person behind the counter. We think that should be extended online. And so this is what we're building out. And again, it comes down to cutting out the middleman. And what you do from a consumer standpoint is you're guaranteed that you're going to support that local restaurant as best you can, but you're also guaranteed the low prices. Because also what happens here is that a lot of these middleman sites are marking up the restaurant fees. And so what the restaurants are now doing are promoting and giving discounts to customers who order direct from them. And so we're trying to get as many people behind this order direct movement as possible. And again, it's not just restaurants, it's a bunch of different industries. So hotels are doing the exact same thing. A lot of people think they go to Expedia.com and they get best price. You actually usually get the best price if you go directly to that hotel's website. And so this massive movement that's now coming about to cut out the middleman and have that direct connection again back with that underlying restaurant in our case. So with that, I want to open up with questions. See if there's anything out there.
Is this on? Okay, perfect. Yeah, I've been following ChowNow for a while since you started integrating with Facebook, and I'm still wondering, have you started integrating more with POS systems like Aloha, Radiant, Revel, things like that?
Is the question, do we integrate with POS systems? We don't today.
Okay. Any plans? Because that's holding a lot of restaurants up. They want POS.
They do want POS. The challenge is with the POS industry specifically is you have the old school, the Micros Alohas, who were invented before online ordering ever existed, and they're nearly impossible to integrate with.
Totally.
Yeah, and then you have the new school guys, the iPad-based systems, who are growing, but still very, very small as a percentage of the overall POS universe. So we're having discussions with both the iPad-based folks, the new school class, and as they grow and they have more restaurants, it makes more sense for us to spend the time and energy and resources to integrate. And we're also talking to the old school, the Alohas, Micros, and they're starting to evolve now because they are starting to have pressure from the new school class. And so at some point this will give and there'll be a lot more integration.
Okay.
Would love to just get your thoughts on food technology space as a whole, because it's kind of new and exciting, but a lot of people don't know what it means and maybe what it means for you as a company. If you could elaborate?
Yeah, I'm trying to think which way to take that question. So food tech's been around for a while. OpenTable has been around since the late 90s. Everyone kind of thinks of OpenTable being around for the last 6, 7, 8 years, depending on how long you've been using it. But they really got started in the first big .com boom And they were the first company, and it was very, very hard for them to go and sell into restaurants. And so they had to build a very large outside sales team that would go restaurant by restaurant by restaurant, because no one would buy over the phone. You couldn't do demos easily online. And so it was very different, and restaurants were very, very skeptical back then. And so from our aspect, it was very hard to sell into restaurants. And so as we were going out raising money, we go to investors, and they all had scars where they had backed some company that was selling into local restaurant groups, and it was just so costly and so expensive, and the industry as a whole was so skeptical a decade ago. What has since changed is the large guys I mentioned, the Domino's, the Chipotle's, the Papa John's, are seeing so much success, and they're now just openly talking about how successful this is, and they're talking about sales, that the little guys are paying attention, and they're now not just welcome the conversation, they're actually starting the conversation. So companies like us, and a number of companies in the food tech space, are now have a ton of inbound leads, which would never have existed a decade ago. And so what you're finding are restaurants are much more willing today to adopt technology, partly because the people that are now running restaurants are kind of this new generation of folks, but two, it's out of just a need to stay in business. With the profit margins as thin as they are in the restaurant industry specifically, if you don't have the latest tools and you're constantly optimizing, you're going to fall behind. And so that's what's happening. On the flip side, though, is because some restaurants are so desperate, they're going for anything. And they're giving away all their profit margins. And so that's the balancing. And a lot of restaurants, frankly, have been screwed over by platforms and by kind of easily being sold. People have different opinions on Groupon. And I have a kind of a middle of the road opinion on Groupon. It works really well for some restaurants, and it's awful for other restaurants. It depends how you use it. But some restaurants have been screwed over by the daily deals as one example, and there's other marketing platforms that just did not work. And so they have to be much more careful and educated on where they go. And so there is still a little bit of skepticism within the industry. So, yeah. Cool. Cool.
You talked a lot about on-demand delivery. It seems everyone wants to get into that Uber game, make eating a lot faster. But what do you think the next set of opportunities is going to be in food tech? Where are we going from here after everybody is already fast?
Yeah. I think it's over the next couple years, where I see this going is you're going to see a lot more restaurants that in New York are called second floor restaurants, meaning they don't actually have a storefront popping up. And so some of our clients here in LA are already talking about opening these locations that are purely delivery centers where they get to use. So in the case of Uber delivery and Uber Rush, and it's what we're working with right now, in a sense, it's kind of like AWS if you use Amazon Web Service at all, but it scales up and down as you need it. So you're packed on a Friday night, you have 100 deliveries, you have 100 delivery guys available that can come and pick it up with no additional overhead. You're slow on a Wednesday, and you have 20 deliveries, well, you can scale down those 20 deliveries without that extra overhead, without delivery drivers hanging around. And so because of that, and because there's no additional overhead, I think in the near term, over the next couple of years, you're going to see more restaurants that have pretty good existing brands opening these delivery-only centers. Here locally, someone like Sugarfish, who has an amazing brand here locally in LA, could easily open a delivery center, delivery-only, create an operation purely around delivery, and then use technology like the platform that we provide them, and then also use Uber Rush as the bottom of their stack, and they're kind of in the middle of this stack in the sense where they provide amazing food. And I think you'll see more and more of that over the next probably 18 to 24 months. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. What kind of data are you collecting on your suppliers and customers? And would that data ever be valuable to third parties?
Yeah, so right now on our platform, we have 1 million active users ordering food from our network of restaurants. And so obviously all that data is being collected and being warehoused. We're very careful not to release that information. Only people that get access to this information are underlying restaurant clients who co-own that data with us, which is very different than the platforms we talked about. And we allow them to do very specific things with that data, and they can't see any other restaurant's data. So it's basically siloed for every individual restaurant. But this is also information that restaurants historically have never had. They don't know that you order 3 times a month from one restaurant and you're going to spend $300 a month there. And so we have to make it, it's basically our job to go into their world and break this out in a very easy to understand. Terms that we don't use with the restaurants are things like LTV, this is the lifetime value of your customer. Again, this is something that restaurants historically have never really thought about, but now they have all this data, and so we need to break it out and simply kind of show them this reports. You can take it a step further, and so what we see are, so across our suite of tools that we offer, one thing we build are individual iPhone apps for restaurants. Those iPhone apps are adopted by about 10 to 15% of their overall customer base that orders online, but that 10 to 15% orders 3 times as much as anyone orders on a website. So for the restaurant, it's really the holy grail to get as many customers to download that mobile app because they're going to order 3 times as much. And so this is stuff that we look at all day long. This is fairly new to restaurants, and so we now have an in-house marketing team that helps them understand this data. So, so.
Okay, so let me go and tell them. All right, you guys, that was the last question.
I
was the
talk to you
last
offline.
question. Sorry. Oh, wait, okay, go ahead, real quick.
The question was, how is Uber Rush different than Uber Eats? So Uber Eats, if you guys have experienced it, is basically every single day they pick a few restaurants in your neighborhood. They pack these cars up with anywhere from 50 to a couple hundred meals in it, and these cars drive around your neighborhood until you go into the Uber app, say, hey, I want that sandwich. The guy comes by, drops it off, and that's that. There's very little in the way of selection. It's very good. It's the number one driver of that is pure convenience. I'm starving. I need food here in 15 minutes or less, and it works very well for that. Uber Rush is very different from the standpoint. Think of it more as like a FedEx. There's no actual marketplace. There's no e-commerce store that you can go to and actually buy. It's purely a network of delivery drivers, and so Uber's considering it. Basically, they now look at themselves as 3 different platforms. They have Uber, the taxi passenger service, Uber Eats, that platform, and then Uber Rush is a brand new platform that we're helping them build out. No. We've talked about doing various things with Uber Eats, but as of today, it's purely Uber Rush for us. Yeah.
And it's as Lucas evolved
Cool.
grinder to a highly scalable.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll be in the back if you have any questions.
Support
Well.
Which supports millions of users around the world.